Coach, I guess just if you want, give us an opening salvo of where they're at now that you got them back and 2 weeks away from the start of the season.
Yeah, I think the guys are hungry to play somebody else. I think it's nice in the fall when we get a chance to kind of measure ourselves against outside competition, but they're getting to that point where they've seen the same lineup, they've seen the same type of guys at the plate, have some expectations of who's doing well, who's not. I always think at this time of year it starts to benefit the hitters a little bit when they start facing the same pitchers time and time again. And it's certainly, I think, good for us. We're getting some of those other guys back in the mix. Tommy, Brady Neal, those guys have been swinging the bat well and playing well lately, and certainly provides a lot more depth to our lineup where they missed some time with us in the fall.
Yeah, what have you seen from the offense?
It's good. I mean, it's one of Coach Johnson and Coach Wanaka's typical offenses. They're going to be able to drive up pitch counts. They're going to be able to do some damage. They're going to be able to create some indecisiveness for people, and you got to make pitches. I mean, that's kind of the fun part, is that we take great pride in having depth to many layers of the game, and that's just one of them.
What's allowed Gage Jump to have so much success? Obviously, coming off a pretty tough injury. Just what about him has made him one of the better pitchers for you guys, and somebody you're going to really want to lean on this year?
Well, he's got stuff. I mean, the metric world can measure some of those things. He's certainly competitive. Left-handed, it's just different when you can do what he does from that side of the rubber. And so when you have that, you have kind of an advanced secondary repertoire that you can go to. I think those things just kind of as a blend, and there aren't guys like him. So the uniqueness of what he does, I think, kind of sets him apart, in addition to all of the things that he already kind of possesses intrinsically from his competitiveness and just desire to want to be good.
So yeah, he's a 4-pitch mix guy, right? So like, how does that sort of help? So how does he sort of utilize those secondary pitches so effectively? Like what sort of strength would that have?
Well, I think there's two ways that you look at it. One, if a guy can pitch ahead without using his weapons, then he can go ahead and finish off with something different. Or if a guy happens to be behind, can they go to something else rather than guys just sitting on a fastball? In this day and age, as much as fastball velocity is measured and lauded, and so many people get excited about those things, you start to look at it and you go, well, I watched a couple of the pro guys today. They're working to get closer and closer to that pitching machine because they know what they're going to see in spring training. So velocity is nice. It is part of the component, but when you ask good hitters what they have to do, well, if I have to cover both sides of the plate and I have to look for multiple pitches and there isn't a predictability to what's going on, that I think is what's allowed him to have success.
Does it help him get out righties as well?
Yeah, otherwise you're a left specialist.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's, I think his ability to pitch in the top and bottom of the zone and to pitch to both sides, I think there's a couple of ways that you look at it. You've got vertical, you've got horizontal, and then you've got front to back, kind of that three-dimensional thing. And the better hitters will tell you that the better pitchers understand getting the barrel out in front of the hands, catching the barrel deeper in the zone, creating kind of bad swing decisions, and when you have his arsenal, you can do that.
Is there a particular secondary pitch that he has that sort of intrigues you or stands out to you?
Curveball's different. I mean, we've got him and a couple other left-handers where their breaking balls are unique, and he's added the slider, which wasn't part of his kind of arsenal in the past. And the changeup has been a work in progress, as it is for most guys with good fastballs, because to them now a changeup ends up being a bad fastball, and because they have good secondary stuff with regards to their breaking ball, the changeup tends to kind of lag behind. So he's made a point of emphasis of trying to get that better. His last outing, he didn't showcase it a whole lot, and his side work this week, a lot better with it. So we'll see how it goes moving forward.
Pitchers have been here 3 years, fit 3 different coaches. And so how do you kind of impart your knowledge? I mean, knowing they have all this 2 years of different coaches, and how do you approach it?
Yeah, I think it's a filtration system for all of us. I mean, we all have different bosses at times in our career, and as you go through it, I mean, it almost mirrors out of professional baseball. You're going to have a different guy from A-ball to AA to AAA to the big leagues, and sometimes even big leaguers, there will be some turnover at the big league level. So it's knowing what you need to take out of it. The analogy that I hear time and time again in our industry is like it's a buffet. You take the things that you want, you put them to good use, and you kind of bypass some of the things that you don't.
As you put this staff together, what do you like about it?
The competitiveness. A lot of guys that had some history to it, and guys that I think understand the importance of getting outs, not necessarily am I starting, am I closing, what's my role. You look at last year with Ackenhausen and Herring, if they don't do what they did, then certainly the team doesn't end up where they're at. And those are guys that at the beginning of the year could have probably said, well, I'm not starting, or I'm not starting on a Friday, and it gone south. Instead, they stayed engaged, stayed focused on their work, and that way, the strange way of this game is it will come calling to you at some time. And if you don't stay engaged with the things that you can control and preparing to do the work, then what's going to happen is you're going to get exposed when your name does get called. To those guys and some of the others, just the ability to be open to change from JK to Wes, now to myself. I'm sure there's some things that are similar. I'm sure there's some things that are different. And guys like Christian Little, go through the list of these older guys where it's been different for them, but I think it's different in a good way. I think that they're kind of coming out on the other side and seeing a better version of themselves.
Each the other day was talking about how he likes how you sort of blend the old school and the new school when it comes to coaching these guys up. I guess, how do you sort of create that balance between those two, I guess, ideologies?
I think it's important to just be where you are. The old school, yeah, I'm probably a little bit older than some coaches in this game, but you have to stay current. You have to stay up to speed with the tools that are available to you. So it kind of speaks to their language a little bit more, because some of them are video game kind of biased, where everything's visual, and so when you can show them what the numbers do and show them on video how it plays, those things are there. But there's still some time-tested principles that the old timers or the old school guys will tell you. You got to get ahead. You got to land more than one or two pitches, and you have to be able to control the run game and field your position. So as a pitcher, I think you can look in this thing, but if you get too deep, then you get lost in, what do I just need to do? What are the 4 or 5 things that I need to do to make sure that I give myself the best chance to succeed?
Did it take you time for you to learn that new school language at all?
Not necessarily. I think that it's a constant puzzle. The pieces are always moving around, and on certain days, if teams are going to run an offensive approach with certain things, they might give away that approach. And if you can go to one of your other options, you can explain that to them a lot quicker. And so again, speaking their language is important. But picking up on it, the kids, I learn from them, they learn from me, and I think it creates a good synergy between us.
Do you have an example of how you sort of implement some of those new ideas while also, I guess, sticking to your old school principles, like the guy you work with or something like that?
The nice part is the fall. I think there's trial and error, and so as you explain to them up front what you're going to try to do, and then when you see elements of it that pop up that are both good or bad, you can use those as teaching moments, and then be able to kind of go back and say, all right, now how are we going to build off of that? So it's probably the best way is just the old time and tested, just get your hands dirty and try to apply it and win anywhere you can.
Do you sense that being the opening day starter or the Friday night starter is a coveted thing amongst your pitchers, and does that increase the competition?
I think it is in any campus that you go to, but the reality of it is your job as a player is to just continue to get better, because once Friday's over, the most important game is now Saturday, and once Saturday's over, the most important game is Sunday. And if you look at teams that typically host regionals, they win Tuesdays. And so the Tuesday starter has every bit as much importance, and if he does his job, he can take a lot of weight and a lot of pressure off your bullpen to stay fresh for the weekends. So everybody's doing their part in that sense, and I like it in that it keeps it competitive, but it's also keeping it in a big picture version of things. I remember coming through here in a regional in 2012, and they had 2 guys named Nola and Gossman, and their careers ended up pretty good. So I think if you ask those guys, hey, you're going to pitch on Saturday and Sunday, but it means we're going to win, and then, yeah, I think they'd sign up for that.
Coach, your pitchers that had all-season surgery, how far along are each one of them?
They're coming along. They've both been throwing. We're just kind of taking it more in a short, probably 10 to 12-day window, trying not to get out too far ahead, but they were both in good spots right now, and we'll revisit that kind of as each week unfolds.
What's your philosophy with sort of bringing guys like Chase and guys like Jaden who had the surgery relatively recently and may or may not pitch this season? How do you sort of, what's your philosophy on bringing guys like that along?
Keep them included in everything possible. I've been an injured pitcher, and a lot of times you're dismissed. You're put off to the side and you're left alone, and okay, we're going to focus on the guys here that can help us now. But if you're working to advance your program, you need to keep those guys engaged, and right on down to keeping them in a uniform, keeping them on a chart, letting them jump in the drills that they can jump into without throwing, so that they're not too far from going from kind of the sofa to the frying pan where they feel like everything just gets sped up. So we're trying to keep those guys engaged as much as possible, and I think that when you do that, they're a lot closer than you think when the time comes.
What's a way that you sort of keep them mentally engaged?
I'll put them on charts. We'll meet and we'll talk about stuff that they've done in their bullpens, or just running kind of some mental reps and trying to get them out on the main field. Because at the end of the day, you can do all the dress rehearsals you want. It's being on stage, so the more that we can put them on that stage and put them into that environment, I think that helps them.
Have you started to identify any back end guys?
That's the nice part, is I think that we've got a handful of guys that can do it. Obviously, Guidry's done it in the past. Kate Woods, who's transferring from Alabama, has done it in the past. You look at last year, I think there was a handful of guys that had saves. So I've been around enough offensive guys that when they're trying to game plan, if you just set aside one guy, everybody wants Mariano Rivera. I mean, Trevor Hoffman, guys like that. But in this day and age, if a guy was to throw, say, a Friday and a Saturday to finish a game and got the job done, and you have 3 other capable guys to put in that last 3 outs or whatever it takes, college is a little different. You see some hybrid closers that will go out there and throw 5, 6 outs, sometimes even more. And your offense can allow you to make some of those decisions too if you're up 3 and you're at the right part of the order. But the back end, to me, it's different in the sense of the game might be on the line in the 8th inning, and you might have to go to your guy then, and now he's gotten you through, and maybe that's all he had to give you for that day, and you can go to somebody else. So we're trying to give as many guys opportunities to be able to do those things.
So Jay certainly showed that in the past. So you don't really, it's not a 1-2 and then find a closer kind of situation for y'all.
Well, I think everybody would like that, but it's also not the reality of it. It's just, if you have guys that can get it done, maybe a guy's better suited to face left-handed bats, and they happen to be right-handed. And you say, okay, well, I got a guy that can do that too. So from a pitching staff standpoint, we're trying to look at it like a tool chest and see if we have as many usable tools down there as possible.
What are your, I guess, thoughts on Cam Johnson, just kind of the way that he's fit in as a freshman to kind of help you guys out this year? What are some of the things that stand out about him in his career?
Well, I mean, obviously the physicality. He's a big, strong kid. He's got a live arm and a good fastball. He's going to go through the same challenges that every freshman does. There isn't really anything that anybody's going to throw up there that he hasn't seen. He's had some success against some of our guys, and some other guys have had some success against him. So I think it'll be managing the ebbs and the flows and just maintaining consistency, because a lot of times guys have pretty much rolled through high school and had a lot of success. Well, the teams that might have challenged you would have had that good 3-hole hitter. Well, now he's hitting in the 8-hole for somebody else, so that tells you how much their lineups are advanced. So it's just, again, for him, as it is for a junior or a senior, it's managing the things that he can control and maintaining consistency through both success and failure.
How important was it to have Isaac Trujillo and Jeremy McMillan sort of join you here at LSU, and what's your relationship with those guys?
Extremely important. I think what those 2 guys bring to the table and our ability to speed along the recovery process for somebody that's healthy, to speed along the recovery process for somebody that's coming off an injury. We all kind of speak the same language, and we work extremely well together. So when those guys had said that they were going to be headed this direction, I was extremely tickled, because we have a format in place that's had a lot of success. Working with Isaac at Arizona, again at A&M, and then picking up Mac along the way, I think has made a big difference. And their ability to do their job is one thing, but their ability as people is tremendous, and our kids really are drawn to those guys and their personalities. And they do it different, but I think that that's what kind of makes it fun, is be a little salty and a little sweet in there.
So I've got a couple of questions. In the next 2 weeks, what's the biggest question you would like to see answered about this staff as you approach opening day? And then the second one involves the protocol, if you will, of between you and Jay Johnson on who decides who's available, the game plan for that day, maybe the weekend series, maybe the next 2 weeks.
Sure. Kind of your first question is just establishing consistency and seeing how we deal with setbacks. Everybody has this vision that opening day and opening weekend is just, it's going to be a breeze. We will have some setbacks. I mean, that's baseball. You're not going to go undefeated in the season no matter how hard you try. You're not going to throw a shutout every game no matter how hard you try. And if guys are doing their job to the best of their ability, well, it probably means that it's going to limit it for somebody else in the sense of, well, I was expected to get 3 innings on the weekend instead I only got 1. Well, I mean, that's the competition of this game, and it's a lot like life, so kind of dealing with those ebbs and flows. As far as the game management side of things, my job is to let Jay know who's available. Spend our time looking through our analytics, looking through video, and figuring out where our matchups are. And then I think there's a readiness too. When kids stretch and play catch, kind of making the rounds, seeing, all right, where's this guy at? Because we still forget sometimes that they're young men. They're dealing with a lot of changes. Some of them are living away from home for the first time. This will be new to some of those guys, no matter how many times they've scrimmaged. When the box is filled and people are getting excited about what that is, it's the closest thing to probably Major League Baseball that some of them will have experienced. So in that sense, I think that making sure that we have some guys that are mentally ready as well as physically, and just communicating those things to Jay throughout the game. Making sure that
is your relationship with him markedly different than anybody you've had relationships with in the past?
I think each relationship's different. I think that he gives me space to work, and it's been great. He's got a pretty even keel, pretty just kind of neutral motor with things. And are there things that he wants to change? Yeah, he'll come in, we'll sit down, we'll talk about it, and he'll ask good questions about, hey, can we do some of these things, rather than there's times when people will make demands that so-and-so should be able to do this and so-and-so should be able to do that. Yeah, I think that's what every coach would like, is for every player to be able to do something. But I think that's one of his strengths, is being able to understand where can we put this kid in a position to have success, and then allowing them that opportunity to go ahead and play.
What was the guy we're going to be talking with, I should say, in a few minutes? What do you sort of like about his arsenal and how important he's for his team this year?
Strikes, competitive, advanced understanding of where things are relative to what he brings to the mound that day. I think a lot of times with pitchers, there's a little bit of an ego that I want to throw this one by him, or I want to make him look foolish, or I want to do this or that. He's gone out there with more of a surgeon approach. I'm going to make pitches, and he's very, very aware of where he's at, so he's a good self-evaluator. He understands where he needs to get better, and I think you can have a little more advanced conversation with him, and I think it's pretty important when you look at what he's been able to do in his time here. He stayed very grounded in that nature, and we like to have a little fun back and forth between whose football team is better, so we keep it light.
Who was that? I didn't hear.
Yeah.
And Justin Lohr. What are the football teams? What's the debate?
Well, there's the Packers and the Vikings, and I told him it's a good thing he's here, because this will be the first time that he's worn purple and gold and been able to be on a team that wins.
What do you think late last year did for Thatcher Hurd's confidence, and now maybe in terms of him going to the next level, as Jay had said, and some of his teammates, he can be a top 5 pitcher in the country?
Yeah, it's just, for him, it's like anybody else, it's establishing consistency. In 2018, we went through a similar kind of growth and transformation with a young man that I had at Oregon State, where Kevin Abel was kind of up and down and up and down, and down the stretch it was very good against the teams that he threw against, and a handful of them were from this conference. And so kind of being able to go through that process with him has given me perspective of what that's going to be going through with Thatcher, and just, hey, here's what guys are going to do. There are no secrets anymore. You pitch through this league, everybody has video and understanding of what you like to do, and can you do the things that you do well, really well. And it's not going to be a change where he's going to go get 4 or 5 miles an hour or more. It's just going to be, can you execute those pitches?
Brady Neal's another guy we're going to be talking to pretty soon. What do you sort of like about the way he catches games and how he handles his stuff?
Brady's got all the tools to play this game for a long time, and you know, when he does it right, it's really right. And for him, I think it's just continuing to stay engaged. That's the challenge of a catcher more than anything, is you can impact the game on both sides of the ball, but as crazy as it sounds, you might have a big swing somewhere in the game. If you don't handle things on the catching side of things, that big swing never even comes into play. So when you've got roughly 100 to 120, 130, depending on the pitches that night, that's how many times you can impact the game. So being clean, catching the ball well, keeping a good pulse and a good tempo, he's really kind of getting better and better at those things. So it's nice to have him back out there.
Is that weird to have 3 very established catchers that you could go to? I mean, I'm sure it's a luxury that any team would love to have, but does it affect the staff though?
No, I think it allows us opportunities to match them up even better with guys that that they're more familiar with catching. Sometimes it's personalities, sometimes it's the ball flight, with the way that they set up to receive, the way their body's structured, that it allowed them to catch certain guys a little bit differently. And much like a bullpen, when you can make some moves and switch some things around and have the guys that we have available, I think it gives us options of ways to manage the game that help not only us out, but here's the thing that catchers forget too, is that everybody wants to catch, but it's a demanding position. And at the big league level, they'll take the best guys and they'll give them some days off and move them over to first base or DH, and just to create some longevity, not only for the season, but for their career. And I think that is kind of the silver lining in this whole thing for those guys, that they're not going to be asked to shoulder the load for 56 plus games and be out there every day.
Is that something that goes into your factoring when you're developing a rotation?
Yeah, I think it's something that you consider for sure. And then obviously performance is going to trump that, because if guys continue to swing a hot bat and they catch well and we win, I think they do in the NBA, plus minus, who's playing well and how well does your team go when you're on the court versus when you're not. They do catcher's ERA and a lot of those other statistical things, but you can just feel the general flow of those things. And Coach Jordan does a tremendous job with those guys. So when he understands that we're in the service industry, we're trying to help that guy on the mound, I try to remind them, we're trying to get you out of there as fast as you can and back in the dugout, so you're not taking foul tips and you go get to do what you've liked since you were a little kid, and that's it.
With Isaac and Jeremy, what does your familiarity with them allow you guys to sort of accomplish that? Maybe harder if you're working with some of your guys at those spots.
Making some adjustments if we need to. Everybody's in a constant state of adjustments with deliveries, certainly their health, how much can we get out of them, or how much should we maybe back off if there's a better understanding of what they can handle from a workload standpoint.
You didn't coach, you weren't coaching here a year ago, but what did you take away from the fact that, a lot of fans said LSU only had one pitcher all year, and all of these guys all stepped up and got better and improved? You Ty Floyd, Thatcher, the other guys you talked about to win the title. Does that speak to the process and how long the season is?
Yeah, I think it speaks to their growth and development individually as well. I've seen Ty Floyd since he was a freshman, and this guy's going to be pretty good. He does some things that are unique as well. Coach Riley Cooper at Arizona, strikes deluxe, a lot of them. And Nate Ackenhausen is kind of made of that same mold. And when you look at Griffin Herring and some of those things, the brightest lights, they may help you identify some of the bigger stars, and I think that competition brings out the best in them. So it was a matter of time. Paul shouldered a lot of the load carrying them and getting to that point, and then they took it across the finish line from there. So they're kids, just like all of us being a work in progress, that it was their time. And I think that collectively as a group, when you see some of those other pieces like Dylan, Trey, Dugas, that were kind of the heartbeat of the program, and that's not to slight anybody else, that they're all on the same page. And I don't think that at some point it mattered who they sent to the mound. They knew what they were going to get, and that was a competitive outing.
Kevin Guidry said the other day that you've been pushing for him to sort of rely on his fastball even more. What do you sort of like about that pitch, and I guess how important is that for him?
Yeah, when it's right, it sets the table for his breaking balls and for his changeup. Yesterday in the scrimmage, he threw some really good changeups. Breaking ball has always been there and always will be. So it's just how do we advance his game? And it would be no different for a hitter. How do you stay on a breaking ball? Can you handle a fastball lane? So we're just looking for ways to continue to get better, and that's really where our focus is.
Is there an aspect of the fastball that you sort of want to see growth from, I guess?
Everybody, I think, command. The velocity is much like power for a hitter, and that it'll start to increase a little bit more over time. You mentioned Lord earlier. I think his is going to continue to grow over time. You may look up in 5 years and see, well, this is better than what he was at a certain age, and they all just come at different times.
And with Lore, you have so many different types of left-handed pitchers. Like how do you sort of manage and decipher, which lefties to use for certain situations? Because you guys have the luxury of having like 7, 8, 9 guys.
Well, I think they'll figure out some of that thing based on their performance, and truth be told, some of the starters will figure that out. Because do you have to go to the bullpen earlier? Do you have to go to it later? How much depth they give you will dictate that a little bit, I think.
Is this a unique situation for you with this many options on the left-hand side?
To some degree. I think just the sheer numbers of that. it'll be our job again to put them in a good place to perform. So the uniqueness will certainly be, I think, on display when they show up prepared to work on a daily basis.
Go ahead and wrap up with Coach and bring up Brady. Good? Thanks, Coach. All right, thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Coach.